The 2024 World Chess Championship is officially underway. On the one side, we've got from India, Gukesh Raju, a very young player, recently won the Candidates in Toronto, where I was actually hosting a fan zone, so I got to see a lot of his chess in person. And on the other side, we've got Ding Liren from China, the current defending world champion. Now, there's a lot of controversy, surrounding the World Championship right now, especially because Magnus Carlsen is not participating. But our current champion is Ding Liren, and this is one of the first times, I think, in a long time, probably since Magnus himself challenged, that we actually see the current world champion probably regarded as the underdog against the up-and-coming, the young superstar in Gukesh. Let's take a look at round one. Now, the most exciting thing about this game, as we just get started here, Gukesh had the white pieces against Ding. He starts with e4, and immediately from move number one, we can already see pure excitement. The French. Now, I don't know if this opening actually excites you, but I'm telling you guys, this is a very, very rare opening to see at the top of chess, let alone in the World Championship of all places. So, immediately, I knew this was going to be exciting. So we get started with, I would say, a very standard series of moves here. This knight c3 move invites the win hour here, but knight f6 indicates different plans. Bishop b4 is a very standard move. I myself have played the French, most certainly not at World Championship level. And the win hour, bishop b4 is the variation that I like to go for, but knight f6 is the classical attempt, f4, c5, and knight e2. So white's indicating that, look, I'm basically planning to play c3, knight out, bishop out. Every single piece works at guarding the d pawn here. That's what this opening is all about. The bishop, on the other hand, you can see it's kind of an issue. How's it going to get developed? Either this knight can move later, or most likely, this g-pawn will move to facilitate the bishop's development, and then that's how white can castle. So white drops the knight back. Kind of a peculiar move here, but certainly well within the main lines of theory, and a5 gets played. Now, a5 is definitely a tougher move to explain. This isn't one that's going to make a lot of sense when there's pieces that could be developed from black. Pay attention to this piece right here. This is the definition of why most people do not play the French. That's called the French bishop right there. Pretty much the entire opening dictates that this will be a bad piece. Now, a5 is played definitely to gain some space over here, but also to take control of the b4 square as well. But really, a5 is to play a4 and a3. There's not a lot that black can do. I mean, we can play bishop e7. In general, we don't really want to play f6 that much in this opening. h5 secures the f5 square, but we don't really have a knight that can jump there. So black plays a5, knight f3, a4, just purely continuing. I mean, Ding is already playing such peculiar looking moves, and he's playing them very slowly. If you look at the time, you can see an hour and 26. They started at 2 hours. Meanwhile, Gukesh is just under 2 hours. This means, like, if I was seeing Ding play a5, a4, especially playing the French, which is an opening that he chose to bring out, then I would definitely expect that, on move, what are we here, 8? That he wouldn't be so far in the think tank. Bishop e3 played, bishop e7, and now we see the most exciting move so far, g4. g4 indicates, clear offensive intentions on the king side, and definitely the bishop will be developing here as anticipated. But g4 is also a very loose move. One thing you want to avoid all the time is, for example, if black were to play the move h5 here, not a great move. G5 would be the worst move that you could play on the board here within reason. Black could just play g6, and you can see there's not really anything else that can happen on the king side. So this would shut everything down. Much better for white would be to actually take. Then you could get maybe the knight over here. Could push this when necessary. f5 might be happening next. So lots of good things that can occur there. So important that white gets something going on the king side rather than closes things up. This indicates that f5 is on his mind. Queen a5. White's playing over here. Black's very clearly playing on the queen side. Bishop g2. White would love to get castled, where the rook would be situated perfectly to help out on the f file. And now we see a great move by black, a3. It makes me think on the previous move that first thing I would think of would actually be the move a3. This stops the pawn from going there, and this pawn structure is a lot better, more solid than this pawn structure. Because now the c pawn is loose, a target, and even if the pawns capture on d4, the knight will be able to reach the b4 square. So for example, let's just say here, I'm just going to castle just to show us an idea. The knight getting the b4 square could actually be really annoying in the future, because then that pawn gets hit at all times. But the counterbalance is white just can go all in on the attack. f5, knight f4 looks really unpleasant. So I thought maybe white would prevent that with a3. Instead, he doesn't care. Gukesh is just developing, going fully offensive with the move g4. This is the World Championship match. I don't know what nerves are at play here. We see Ding under an hour at this point, used more than half of his time, and we're only on move 11. And then Gukesh, on the other hand, just playing very enterprising, even bringing out the move g4 in a World Championship match is crazy. Takes b4. So nice intermezzo there. A lot of the lines that I was talking about aren't really possible with pawn takes back, which might be preferable because Ding obviously took this moment to capture because he knew that white wasn't castled, which means the pawn was pinned. After b4, if you take with the pawn now, it makes much less sense. You'll be hanging that pawn. So of course, Gukesh is going to use his knight from e2 to capture. You could make a case for the other knight as well, but in my opinion, the knight on f3 is better placed than the knight on e2, so may as well use the knight on e2 to recapture. Knight b6. Finally, we see Ding, consider this piece that he's so left behind. Bishop will come to d7. This knight definitely going to the c4 square. Now that the pawn's on b4, it's not covering that square, and of course this bishop isn't even on that diagonal, so the c4 square becomes the most desirable here. Castles, knight c4, and immediately, I wouldn't say that black has a better position, but black's at least accomplished something, and with bishop d7, it's very clear where all the pieces should go. White's idea of f5, really trying to punch things home, open things up, is very difficult to achieve at the moment because that e pawn can be targeted. So as white, I might be thinking about like rook e1, queen e2, king h1 to get off this diagonal, and in the future, bishop to g3 and even f5. This is a long-term plan, right? I want to get f5, but I need so much work, just making sure e5 is defended in so many different ways before I can do it. And that's a lot of moves that Ding now has to play with. Queen e2, there's one of them. Ding decides to capture and play this rather curious looking knight to b2. Now the knight is not actually doing that much on b2, but it could reroute to a4 in the future where it hits the c3 pawn, pretty annoying. The rook is coming over to the c file, and let's not forget, there is a threat in one move here. Queen takes c3, which gets defended with queen e3. Renewed with rook c8, and defended with rook c1. So everybody's taking care of the c pawn, and black's happy to get developed with a bit of tempo there. But here comes queen to c4. Now that white has used the a rook to move to c1, the a2 pawn is loose here, and Ding continues the attack. He's playing with tempo every single move, and notice how he is not in a rush to castle kingside here. I think for everyone watching, this is exactly what you'd probably be thinking too. I'm not castling into f5, f6. No way. Like, I'm going to get checkmated there. And even if that's not exactly what the engine would want to do, I think we can all appreciate there is a very human element to chess, which is that defending is quite difficult. So Ding is looking to make other threats, find other counterplay with the king in the center before he commits this. And maybe later on, when the time is right, he's going to do it. He's one move away from castling, so he can sort of wait till the moment is right. Right now, a2 is hanging. Is white going back with rook a1? Of course not. White just played rook c1. So now is the time for f5. It's the only moment. And here, with a bit of a double take, Ding does not go for this and instead fakes us out and comes in to d3, offering a queen trade. Now, white's pawn structure here is just so bad, and there's so many targets and great squares like on c4 that white is absolutely not interested in playing this. Now, there may be some other reasons, tactically speaking, why I would say this is also not good. e5 hanging, rook attacked, losing our bishop here. But just from the point of view of who's trying to achieve what, with f5, white's clearly on the attack, so black just, by trading queens, diffuses that naturally and then can continue against the weaknesses. So white decides to keep the queens on the board. There were other moves available here that maybe look decent, queen f4 for example, but moves like this do run into stuff like g5, even h6, bishop g5. But something like this, you either have to trade the queens again, like, you denied the queen trade, but all of a sudden you have to trade again. Don't know if that was worth it, or you take. But at this point, I would say taking here looks pretty scary, but taking with the queen, all of a sudden, black is the one that might be able to make use of the open lines, and the knight is coming into the d3 square guaranteed on the next move. So even though the engine does not like this move, basically a mistake, almost a blunder from Gukesh, queen e1, from a practical perspective, it does make a little bit of sense. However, look how quickly the pieces activate for Ding. Rook c4, there's bishop a4 coming. This rook c4 move makes a very clever threat. Rook takes on d4. The rook on c2 would be hanging. And everybody's still attacking the c-pawn, which white needs to defend. So all of a sudden, we just see activation from all of Ding's pieces. Meanwhile, the bishop playing a very important role on defense. And while black's not castled, black doesn't need to be and can still castle whenever. So a phenomenal game so far by Ding. You can see the time. Ding has 30 minutes, and for the first time, Gukesh has actually lower on the clock. Gukesh was up about 30-40 minutes at the beginning. Ding was in the think tank, but once the position started playing itself, the tempi were being found by Ding, the whole position just kind of came together. It's been a beautiful game so far, and again, Ding reminds us of that world championship form, right? It's possible to just be off your game, preparing, nervous, getting into shape for the entire year prior. But then when it comes to match time for the world championship, Ding is able to just show up, and he certainly is reminding us in game number 1 here that he can do that. h4, bishop f4. I mean, certainly not going bishop h6 and trapping the bishop. Queen b1. I mean, the rook needed defense, and where can you put this rook without losing this pawn? Everything is falling apart here for Gukesh, who's kind of in panic mode right now. Has to drop the pawn anyway. There's just no good way to hang on to things because of that amazingly strong rook takes d4 threat. So Ding has earned himself a pawn here, but he's going to get a little more than that because Gukesh realizes, okay, I'm going to first start by taking here. I'm going to go knight e2, giving up yet another pawn, but at least I have the 2 bishops. And when I was watching this game live, I actually thought in this position, well, hold on a sec. Isn't there a very serious problem? So have a look at this position and tell me what you guys would play after this. Because I was watching live and I couldn't believe it. I actually had to take a second and be like, why isn't this move winning the game? Queen takes h7 here. Looked like it was going to be a complete shock to someone. So I just couldn't believe, why was bishop c5? And by the way, this move was not played. So hopefully I've given you long enough here. You can obviously pause the video, but the reason that this would not be winning is actually the only move. There's one move that can be played here, and it's the insane queen d4. White was threatening rook f8 checkmate if the queen would be captured. Meanwhile, I'm threatening the rook, threatening the pawn, so many other things as well. Queen d4, distracting the bishop. And by the way, if the king would go to h2 or h1, the queen would actually take on h4 check, not take the bishop or anything weird like that. Queen takes h4 check. And then black's completely winning here. And then if the bishop captures, then you can capture safely here. And I'm not saying this is a guaranteed win, but certainly this is an even better position for black than before. The queens have disappeared, and black has just 2 extra pawns in the center of the board. plus a target on a2. So yeah, obviously these guys saw it, but just wanted to point that out for you guys watching. I thought bishop c5 plus queen h7 was going to be like the tactic of the match. And then queen c2 was played, and I said, okay, well, there had to be something wrong with that. And I couldn't believe how crazy it was. Queen d4 was the reason. Anyway, that did not happen. Queen c2 played. And yeah, obviously this is the threat, but again, black is one move away from castling. A queen trade at any moment here always benefits Ding. So he can run around offering the queen trade, and there's nothing that Gukesh can do about it. He can never accept it. And that's a lot of power to have in this position. Queen d2, lo and behold, he castles, and there's just no time for any bishop c5. I mean, it's playable, but it just doesn't do enough. The g-pawn is hanging here, which is why Gukesh plays bishop d4. But he's down to about 3 minutes. The wheels are kind of coming off the position here. Ding Liren is about to strike first in the World Championship, and we just see from this point on pure class from Ding in the conversion. Knight d3. Yeah, maybe worried about the bishop actually capturing the knight, but this move is mainly played to disconnect these pieces. Now the bishop's attacked again, and should it move, the g-pawn would be loose. Queen e3, maybe trying to get ready to attack this pawn as well in the future. If the bishop could come to f1, hit the knight, and then we get control of this square, there's some hope. Ding is too good though. He does not let that happen. Rook takes, bringing the bishop to this square, but don't worry, Ding has it figured out and just comes up with an absolutely stellar move here. If white captures this knight on d3, the match is basically over. Even if you capture with the bishop, I can take on d4 like this, and any queen trade will be good game. That's it. If white plays g5 here, the pawns are all on dark squares. There's some outside chance. I mean, it's lost, but there's an outside chance that maybe you could manage here. The pawns are doubled. You could try to make a draw, but the presence of this pawn here on a light square means that is not going to happen. That's a target for this bishop, plus black's up 2 pawns, easy win. Meaning the move e5, super strong because the bishop now has to move. If we can't take the knight safely, the bishop has to move, whether we capture or just move away. We drop the g-pawn with check, and after bishop f5, bishop e4 is the threat. And now I think Ding has done everything right. There's just nothing left to this game. The bishop is blocking the queen. The queen and bishop are making checkmate threats. Black is about to make me proud, you know, as a building habits practitioner. H6 is exactly what you like to see. The king is totally safe now. Not to mention, there are pawns hanging all over the place. And at this point, we can just witness the conversion here as Ding keeps it simple. He takes on a2. This check is irrelevant. And, I mean, this queen is threatening to go to g2 check. Not to mention, there might even be some sort of queen f2 sacrifice once this pawn gets close enough to become a queen. But the game's completely over. It's going to be 1, 2, 3 extra pawns. Plus, this one is about to just queen itself. That's it. That's round 1 of the 2024 World Championship. Coming into this match, Ding Liren was actually the underdog very clearly. If we've remembered the recent rise of Gukesh, he dominated for his team at the Olympiad. Gukesh also dominated the candidates as well. He's just been on like a meteoric rise. His rating is skyrocketing. His rating is actually significantly higher, as you can see here, 2783 against 2728. 2728, that's not even in the top 10 well, certainly not in the top 10 in the world, but not even like the top 20. So we have our world champion who's for sure not at that top level type of game right now. He's just not there, and Gukesh is. So coming into this, Ding was actually for sure the betting underdog. But those Ding supporters probably realized that, hey, this is a guy that can activate for a world championship match. So that was round number 1. I think this is a great indicator that we're going to have a super exciting match on our hands. It's not going to be a whole bunch of draws. We can obviously tell that, but Gukesh seemed maybe a little bit nervous. Ding brought out the French defense and won with it. So many indications that we're going to have a very exciting and back and forth match on our hands. Ding once again showing that he is that world champion level. And had you asked me before the match, I would have said absolutely. Gukesh is the favorite. Do I rule Ding out? Never, because that's someone that can just turn up for a match format. And that's what great world champions do. But yeah, absolutely, I would have said Gukesh is the favorite. So things are absolutely not over. There are many, many matches. I will be doing daily recaps of all the games with some analysis. So make sure to tune back in tomorrow. I'll be dropping yet another video as soon as the game is over. But this was round 1 of the 2024 World Chess Championship between Gukesh and Ding. I'll see you guys tomorrow.